Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Advanced Reporting in ProjectTeam.com webinar. This is the second edition of our reporting webinars. So we had our first one about a month ago, kind of covering the basics. I will review some of that today, and then we'll kind of take a deeper dive into what the reporting tools in Project Team can do. I will say after each webinar so far, we've kind of sent a survey out, just kind of asking how things went, what were your feedback, etc. That's been awesome and very helpful to kind of put together these webinars. We got a lot of great feedback after our first reporting webinar, and a lot of the things that people wanted to see in this webinar were more about financials, project financials, reports. How do I link a contract, maybe a schedule of values to my original budget numbers? What about change orders, PCOs? Those type of things. So I am going to cover a lot of that in this webinar and do as much as I can in the hour that we have together. I'm also going to go ahead and try to show a couple dashboards. Maybe we'll make a simple dashboard together, and then you can see how easy the drag and drop tools can be using the tools that you have in Project Team. So looking at the last webinar that we had, everybody together built something like this. If you're a user of Project Team, certainly you have access to be able to build something like this. If you're not yet a user, you're just looking at Project Team as a potential tool for your organization, you can build reports in Project Team. What we said last time is Project Team is not complicated in Project Team. You don't need a PhD to be able to create really great and insightful reports. A lot of this is just drag and drop. If you're comfortable in Excel, you can make some really great reports in the system. So what we're going to kind of review and kind of maybe go through very quickly today and kind of jump past are some of the things that we covered in the last one. So we added logos, so you can add company logos or project logos. You can do groupings of data. In this case, we had categories of our RFI, so we grouped on category. We did sort. I guess within that group we add sorts, and we sorted on RFI number. Then we added icons to call out information that was important. We also did totals at the end of our reports. Formatting, so if it's overdue, we'll call that red. Not overdue would be, let's say, black text, but since we did that report about a month ago, it looks like everything is overdue at this point. And then we also added totals not only at the bottom, but at the top, let's say inside of the groups that we added. So that's a review of what we did last time. If you have any questions on that, certainly you can go back and re-watch that webinar. Everything is recorded and put into our website, or if you follow us on LinkedIn, all those things are posted on there as well, which is a really great resource. So we're going to kind of go past what we've done in the last one and talk about some of the new concepts, more advanced concepts within the Project Team reporting tool. So I will say this is going to be kind of an advanced webinar. We're getting kind of really into the weeds here. So don't worry if let's say you get lost a little bit in the beginning. Certainly you can always go back and rewatch any of these webinars, slow it down, whatever you need to do. But we are kind of taking an extra step here. So today's topics are going to be how to link two or more categories together in a report. In that first report that we just looked at, we were really talking about, let's say, RFIs. RFIs would be considered one category. If you make a submittal report, that'd be one category. An inspection report, that's one category. I could even make a contracts report, which is just one category. Simple report, very easy to do. If I want to join more information together, I would need to do something called joins within my report. So if I want to have a contract and show the change orders per contract, that would be two separate categories. And how do you join those things together? Luckily, Project Team has a bunch of out-of-the-box joins that are already preset for you. So you don't really ever need to get into that joining area. You certainly can, but you shouldn't have to very often. So we're going to make a budget report together. I'll talk about joins and show you joins, but you actually don't have to manipulate joins in order to make your budget reports, because we do some things just kind of out of the box within the system that'll help you create those reports. However, you 100% also could create two completely custom form types in Project Team, link something that is similar together and create a join on that information. So whatever you can think of, any report that you ever need, you can certainly get that out in the Project Team system. And then finally, after we kind of go through the reporting side, let's create a budget report together, go through kind of the best practices of creating that. We can also look at creating a dashboard. So this will kind of be near the end of the webinar, but I will show you how to create, a really simple dashboard. There's going to be some pieces, that are more visual. Maybe we can pull in reports to the dashboard. What is a dashboard versus a report? We'll cover all of those things near the end of the webinar. So before I get into the system, just a little background on what is a join. So in this case, if I'm looking at my screen right now, I have two separate reports. On the left-hand side, I have a report on contracts. So these are all the contracts that, let's say, I have on my project. On the right-hand side, I have a list of change orders on my project. Each change order might be related to a different contract. So in this case, I've got more change orders than I do contracts. But I do notice that if I look at the column on the right-hand side of this side and the left-hand side of here, there are things that are going to match. And since there are things that are going to match, in this case, our contract number, we can join on that information. In real life, in Project Team, really, we're going to want something that is more unique than a contract number. Certainly that should be unique, but somebody could add two contract numbers in some cases that are the same for whatever reason. So we're actually going to do most of our joining based on things like account codes or document IDs, things like that. But this shows you just a really quick example of, okay, I've got two reports, one for contracts, one for change orders. Somewhere in the report, there is data that is similar on both of those reports, and that's what we're going to use to join. Similar to that O1, we have O2s here, and then we have that O3 at the bottom of each report. So those are the things that we're going to join. If we actually were to say, okay, I've got these two reports, I want to join them together, what would the result of that be like? Well, we have something that looks like this at that point. In this case, you see that there are contracts, each of those contracts, HVAC, drywall, and painting, but some of those contracts are now showing up twice. Why? Because we have multiple change orders per that contract. So one of the most common questions that we have, or that probably any reporting tool has, is, hey, wait a second, I've added these categories, why is some of my data duplicated? Well, it's because of the way that the joins are handling that data. And in reality, this is a correct report. I actually do have two change orders linked to the drywall contract, and that's why drywall is showing up 2 times. The solution to something like this, though, would be to group the data. So in this case, I say I've got my HVAC contract. Underneath of that, show me my change orders. So I've got the AC unit and the heat pump underneath of that. For drywall, I have these 2 change orders, and for painting, I have the 1. So if we look back at where we started, we had 2 separate reports. Now we're joining these reports based on a common entity, which would be our contract number, and then we can group and sort based on that data. This is a very light example. I will show kind of a more in-depth example, but remember this sort of example here as we actually get into the reports. And then before I actually get into reports, I just want to kind of show a couple screenshots of the types of reports. There's just going to be 4 of them that you can create in Project Team. There's an unlimited number of reports or types of reports that you can create. This is kind of a contracts report showing, I think, the change orders underneath of that. So that kind of goes based off of my example that I just showed through PowerPoint. Here's one that we're actually going to pretty much be building together today, which would be a budget report. I'm going to skip the graph piece at the top for today, but everything else underneath of that, I will show how to kind of put those things together. And this is kind of a pretty common budget looking report that we might look at. Beyond reports, you can create dashboards. So this is a nice dashboard kind of calling out 2 separate form types, RFIs and submittals. Certainly you can put as many different types of categories and documents on your dashboards as you want, but this is a good example. And then here's another example, change of a background color, but we also have some more tiles in here. We've got a live cam from some integrated system, let's say. We are at the bottom left showing an RFIs, by 2 separate types of groups. And then we also have a nice report here on the right that is actually more pulling from a budget report, which has drill downs in it, etc. So 4 quick examples of things that you can do within the system. Really, it's an unlimited opportunities to create and look at your data to deliver value on your projects. And of course, the point of any report or dashboard is to highlight issues before they happen, call out how are we doing overall in the health of our project, etc. And these are some examples there. So that's kind of the overview that I have. Let's jump into the system and see how things work out in live view. Alrighty. So if I jump into Project Team, I'm going to skip the typical login. I am going to jump into a project. So here I am at a project. I will kind of say in the beginning here, especially for the owner type of companies that are out there maybe watching this webinar, you can run reports and gather data across projects as well. So I'm going to be mostly inside of a project, but certainly you have the opportunity to run reports across multiple projects to kind of aggregate that data and look at that however you need. So the first thing that I'm going to do to build a budget report in this case is go up to the left-hand side here and click this plus button. This is going to show me the different types of reports that I can use to build, or options that I can use to build my report. I always do the advanced report. I typically say don't let the word advanced scare you. So that's where I'm going to start. All these other ones that you can create, except for dashboards, all these other ones you can start there and eventually convert to an advanced report at some step. I skip all that and I always just go to advanced reports. In this view, let's say that we want to create a brand new report. So we're going to add the name here. So I'm just going to say this is my budget report for webinar. I'm going to put it in one of these folders. We talked about the folders last time, so I'll skip that. For now, I'm just going to put it in My Access. I could put a description. Let's say Josh created this for webinar, and that'll just help me know what that thing's about if I want to run it later. Next, I'm going to my categories. We talked about categories last time. These are all the types of things that you can pull into your report. Any form type, custom collection, and all kinds of other areas like your project information, contacts, etc., are all included in this category list. For now, because I'm creating a budget report, the first thing that I want to start out with is budget. So if I search through budgets, I see some subset of all my entire categories showing me categories related to the BUDG that I typed in there. So in this case, I'm going to use budget items. The budget item form is a good one to start out with if you're creating a budget report, because it's going to have the basis of your account codes and your original numbers in there. So let me go ahead and just add that. Once I do, you'll see other categories are either grayed out or still available. For now, as I'm just creating a simple budget report to start, I'm going to skip this and I just want this one category. I could include multiple categories at this step, but I'm going to kind of build this thing step by step for you guys watching the webinar. Next, I'm going to go to my sorts. These are going to show all the fields that I have access to on that budgets category. So in this case, it makes sense that I want to sort my budget report by the account code field. Okay. In your sorts, you can have fields like I've pulled over here or double clicked to get it over to the right, or you could create formulas and add that as a sort as well. So I will show this a little bit later, but if there's something custom that you want to put, I want to say only budgets that have been approved should show up first and then non-approved should show at the bottom, or something better like if the due date is 7 days from now, I want to put that at the top versus the bottom. You know, really anything that you want to do in a formula, you could do that. So I'll skip that for now. Do I want to filter the data at all? Let's say no. And then my layout field, I'm actually going to skip this for now. I think we did this last time. But if I wanted to, I could just pull data in there. Let's just say I have the one account code. Maybe I'll do two. So account code and original budget. I'll pull that over there, and it's going to show that data in this little viewer at the bottom. I could pull as many columns as I want, but this is a start, and I'll kind of do a hybrid here of pulling 2 columns and then adding some more columns at the end. So at this point, I can finish this, and technically I have a report. It's going to be pretty ugly. There's no style, there's no formatting, anything like that, but it does give me data pulling from the system. Everything that you fill out in Project Team is immediately reportable. So these are all live values in here. Where is this information pulling from? So I'm going to kind of take a step back here. All of this data is coming from my forms in the system. So if I click on forms really quick, I'm just going to right click and open up, let's say, the budget items form. And I see all of these different items in here. Okay, I've got 2 pages. It's actually, I think, like 87 or 97 budget items. So all these things here with that original budget, okay, are showing up now in this report. Okay, so that's where the data is coming from. If someone creates a new budget item and I type in whatever I want, that thing would now be available in the reporting side for me to get those reports based off of. I do want to kind of show, if I look at a form, let's say I'm looking at a budget item form here, I have an account code field, that 000950, builder risk insurance. If I go to the reporting side, you'll notice that that data, if you can see, it's kind of small maybe, is showing up right there, builder risk insurance for $34,927. Okay, so that data is just coming from my forms. Really easy to type in that data. It's immediately available in the reporting side. A couple other things that I want to point out on the budget item form that we're going to pull into our report. So a lot of times on your budget report, you might have an original number, but then there might be adjustments or amendments or whatever you might call those things. Those are all going to be summed up on your budget item form here, and this is some automatic math that's happening through the amendments forms. And so I have earlier webinars on how to create budgets, amendments, all that. So we'll just assume that this is all working really great. I do have an amendments tab. It looks like I don't have any amendments. That's why it's showing up 0. But these are fields, these bold areas are fields available to pull into my report. So if I go to the reporting side again, I'm going to go to the edit side. I have my original, but I can also add columns after and look in this left-hand side. What else do I want to pull? Well, maybe I want to pull the total approved budget amendments and just place that right there. If I have another column, let's say I want to say, well, my original plus my total approved might give me my revised budget. Again, all these things on the left-hand side are matching those fields that we showed from that form view. If I wanted to add 2 more columns very quickly, I could highlight 2, say next, it'll give me those 2. And I want to say, well, give me my pending and my pending revised budget. Okay. If I run this at this point, okay, still not going to be very pretty at all, but it's starting to give me more numbers and more values. I'm starting to build a better report here. For this construction water utilities, it looks like my original was something like 20,000, but I've got $50,000 in adjustments or amendments that have been created against it, okay, which gives me my $70,000 total for my revised budget. Pretty much anytime I make a change in my report, I'm always going to run that just to see how that change looks. Okay, so you'll see me running reports a lot, but just as an example. The things that looked kind of not so great on the report. Well, the page size is kind of squished. I'm going to be adding a lot of numbers here, so I want that, instead of portrait view, I want that landscape view. Just go ahead and change that. If I go to the gear icon, options, general, at the bottom here it says, do you want portrait or landscape? I'll say landscape. And I also want all of the data to fit the width of my report. So I'm going to check that box and say, okay. Just by changing those couple of things, next time I run this, we'll see the data is going to be a little bit more spread out, which is going to be better, more appropriate for how I want this eventual final product to look. The other thing that's a little bit funny to me is I've got all these numbers in here, but it's kind of hard for me to read, not only because there's no commas, but there should maybe be a $ in front of that or something to show me that it is currency. So you can do that in the system as well. So I'm going to go ahead and back here. I'm going to highlight this one, go to the formatting, say that it's going to be a number. I'm going to use currency fields, and this one was already checked for me, use the 1000 separator, and say okay there. The other thing I can do, very similar to Excel, is just post this over to the right so it's right aligned. If I run this now, you'll see at least that original budget number is going to look a lot better. These ones are still looking funny. So I did one, now I want to do the rest. You can do all of them at the same time, which is a little bit of a time saver, but I did want to just focus on that first one there. So if I go back here, I can just highlight these really quickly by holding my shift key, go in here, say it's a number, use the dollar sign, and I'm going to right align these values. Okay. So this is looking a lot better. The next thing that I want to do, so all of the, and I went through that, I know, kind of quickly, but all of the basics here were covered in the last webinar. So I haven't done anything different. Maybe because it's financial data, it's a little bit scarier or whatever, but really this is just like creating an RFI report. I just pulled in the category, budget items, and then I just started pulling in fields to that report. The next thing that I want to do is start to format all of this. So I could go in here and say this is approved amendments. I can make this bold. I can add underlines under here by highlighting this data, saying that I want to add a border underneath. Okay, so this is all starting to look, a little bit better, a little bit more formatted. If I wanted to highlight this data, make it gray, I could. Okay, and now I can run that. Again, all the formatting that you probably need to know is covered in that last webinar. So again, as I go through this advanced piece, I'm going to skip some of that. So what I have here is a basics of a budget report. It is starting to be formatted. I'm actually now going to skip over to another report that is going to look exactly like this. So let's say that I'm going to close all other tabs. I'm going to open up this one here. Well, let me just run that one actually. So this is another report, okay? This is going to have more formatting, but it's exactly what we've built so far. So there's really no difference between this and the thing that we've been working on together so far, except for formatting. And I don't want to bore you guys by going through and highlighting and adding borders and colors or whatever to my report. But this and this report are the exact same thing. I've just added additional columns on here, okay? So there's nothing changed. So we've built this together. You can build this one and just take some time to format. So I'm going to actually close that old one that we were working on and start from here going forward. So now that we have, like I said a second ago, our budget item information on the report, that is exactly like any other report that we created, including that RFI. The next thing that I want to do is start to add other categories to the report and see what happens to our data when I do that. So if I right click on this and say edit, here I've got that report. You can see it looks just like that other one. It's just a couple more columns on the right hand side. All this stuff is the same. I did, if you have a really keen eye, I did actually add an if statement in here. So if the the pending or budget amendments is nothing, if there is none, I'm going to add a 0 in there. Otherwise, I'm going to show the value. That's just so when I run the report, it's not blank. It either shows 0 or a number. Okay, so that's the only thing I did there. But what I need to do here is now add an additional category. Before I do that, let's talk on the form side what I'm about to show. So we've talked about budget items in the form, and each budget item has this account code on it. Well, now I need to be able to tie things to that account code. So what would I tie? I'd tie commitments like contracts and change orders, uncommitted costs, maybe things that are not approved yet, but I still am tracking in the system, maybe PCOs, maybe anything else that has a dollar value that you want to include on your report. All of those things can be tied to that account code through that join that we showed it in one of the first slides. I'm going to go to the forms and I'm going to click over to contracts real quick. If I look at a contract, you can slap the account code field anywhere that you want on the contract, including the top level fields. So I could add a top level field here and just get the sum against my budget. Or in this example that I'm going to show, I've actually added an account code field to the schedule of values area. Okay, so each SOV line item is going to tie to a different spot on my budget depending on what that equates to, okay? So here I have just another point. I've got this offsite parking and storage actually showing up twice, okay? And that's totally fine. You might have hundreds of values within your SOV. Many of them might be tied to the same budget code item. You might have 20, 30 different subcontracts. Each one of those has line items that are tied back to a specific item on your budget account code. So that's fine. So what I'm going to do here is show you how to tie this back to your budget and what happens to my budget report when I do that. I'm going to go back to reports. So this area, it's actually G, but I've labeled it F because that's where it lined up for me, is open right now. So we talked in the last webinar about these different sections: page header, detail, and page footer. The detail is anything that's going to be repeating at the lowest level of my data. So what I'm going to show here is I need to actually add in that contracts category to my report. So I'm going to click up here. These things, sorts, filters, categories that we showed in the wizard are all also available if I need to edit the report. So I'm going to go to categories. Once I do that, it shows me the categories that are available. I see some things are blanked out, some things are shown still. I'm going to look for the word contract. Okay. What's nice in this view is I have the top level contracts. I have all these different collections. So what's a collection? At the top here, you can see a drawings collection, a specifications, change orders. Any of these tables are what we call collections in Project Team, and all of those are its own category. So you might see contract dot change orders. So if we go to the report side, contracts dash change orders available as a category. Okay, so that's kind of explaining that piece. The other thing that you might notice is the schedule of values, which is what we're going to be looking for. There's a schedule of values, and there's a schedule of values joined by, if I open this up, account code. Okay, if I go back to my contract and look at the general tab, if I go back down here, here's a schedule of values. And since account code is very special, especially on the reporting side, instead of making you all create a join for that, we have an automatic join that's created based on just you adding that field, which is the account code piece, okay? So that's why you have that extra one down here. Really, if you're creating a budget report, I would always advise you using this account code one, joined by account code, because that just kind of signifies, hey, we've already kind of preset a join in there. You could create a budget using this one, the schedule of values. However, you're going to have to manually adjust the joins, which is a little bit more complicated, and most people probably don't want to do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and double click that contract schedule values joined by account code. Okay, so I'm going to add that. All I've done at this point is add the category. I haven't added anything from that category, any fields to my report at all. Okay, eventually I'm going to add it to this blue square, but I haven't done that yet. And the reason for that is just by adding that category and running my report at this point, you'll notice that most of the data looks very similar. However, if you kind of look closely, and I highlight this data here, I'm showing offsite parking and storage twice now. Why is that happening? Because if you remember when I go to that original PowerPoint that I was showing, once we joined the data, contract information in that case was now showing up twice because there was 2 change orders against that contract. Well, based on this contract, we have 1, 2 schedule value line items against that same budget code, right? So if I look at that, I'm seeing those things show up twice. It's not the end result that I want to show. Okay, at some point I'm going to need to group this data so it only shows up once potentially, but that's why I'm seeing duplicate rows, because I added a category now that's related to this budget item category, and that's going to be showing up. To kind of highlight that, if I go back to the edit mode, in this area here, I can open up my contract schedule values joined by budget code or account code category. I see all of these different options which match. Again, if I go back to my contract, all the different options you have in your contract. Now I'm going to pull over the scheduled value and just place it right in there. So it's just really easy, drag and drop. In here now, I could just paint. So this one we already worked on. We added right align, and we added a currency with a 1,000 separator. You can actually click on any of those and format paint this one. Okay, so now this one has all that same information. If I run this, you'll notice now, if we look at that offsite parking, okay, these two values right here, 18,000 and 12,000, are corresponding to values that we had on our contract. Okay, so that's why it looks like the budget item is showing up twice, but really it's showing up once per individual line item contract. So if I go over here, I see that 18,000 and the 12,000 showing up. Okay, so this is just two. You might have 100. That's why you might say, holy crap, I've got so many duplicates in my data. Well, that's because your join is now correctly showing you, based on the similar data that you have, that information. So what do we do at this point? I don't want multiple budget items showing up, because that, like if I was going to add a sum at the bottom of this, I certainly wouldn't want $55,000 showing up twice. I don't want $110,000 showing up, you know, at the end of that budget. I just want 55. So what do we do to kind of combine that information? So what you can do here is you can group by, let's say, the budget side. So what I can do is, if you remember, when I first created my report, we added sorts. I added that account code sort. Because I have that sort, I can now go in and add a group based on that sort. Okay, so I'm going to sort by account code. And now I can just highlight this data, not my contract one, and put it in the group. So this is going to group every budget, or all of the contracts related to the budget, by budget. So in this case, if I run this at this point, now I'm showing one offsite parking and storage, but two contract schedule value items underneath of that. So that's good. If I wanted to sum this up, it would tell me I've got like $30,000 here of my committed contracts, and it's going against $55,000 of my budget. So that is good. I'm not showing 55 twice. This is a lot better. The only problem maybe is I don't want this white space in there. Okay, so what do I do at this point? So what I'm going to do is go back here. Just like I added that header, I could also click on anything here and say I want to group footer. I'm going to match the account code side that I just added. In here now, okay, I need to add some kind of formula to add these things together. So this is one of the first times we're going to be actually clicking in this formula editor, and these can be as robust as you want. This is going to be probably the most complicated piece of creating a report. Everything that I've shown so far is just dragging and dropping or checking some boxes, all super simple. Once you get into the formula editing, this might be considered somewhat complicated, but I think once you do it a couple times, especially for some of these easy formulas, you can do these very quick. So if you remember, I wanted to add, if I look at this thing, I've got 18,000 and 12,000. I actually want that to sum up and eventually go against that 55,000 of my budget. So what I can do is I've added that footer. In here, I'm going to say I want a formula. And I'm just going to say sum, because that's the only word that I know that makes sense. And it does give me a couple of these options, ag sum or running sum. If I click on one of those, it'll give me a little description. It's going to calculate the sum based on field data. I think that's right. Certainly you could try, doesn't work, okay, change the formula, do something else. So say, what do you want to sum? It's probably too small for the webinar people to see, but you can kind of read in here, calculates the sum of the values in the data field using the group footer section, blah, blah, blah. So that's exactly what I want here. And what do I want to sum? Well, I'm going to actually sum the contracts schedule values. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Okay. Same thing, it's going to left align by default, but I can click on here and format paint that to be right aligned. Maybe I even want to just kind of highlight that to show that's the thing that I'm looking for right now on my report, and I can run this. So a lot of times if I make an adjustment also on my reports, I do kind of add this formatting very quickly to say, this is what I've been working on. Now that I have a lot of white page and black text, it might be kind of hard for me to find the values, but I'm just going to highlight things and take that away as needed. But it gives me kind of a way to kind of make a change, run it, see what's happening. Okay, that looks good, and kind of move on. So what we've done, if we look at that offside off-site parking and storage, we have these two contract values, 18,000 and 12,000, and then one sum of those numbers, which is the 30,000. So that looks really good. Except now we've got even more white space, which is eventually what we're trying to get rid of. Okay, so that's all fine though. We're getting the right number, so we just have to reference that. In this case, this is the number that I want to show, and actually it would be great to show it in line with the other values. So right after the 55, right about here, I want to show that 30,000. All I have to do is reference this sum at the bottom. So in this column, which is in line with these, I'm going to look at G, and over here it says 10. Okay, so I'm going to say equals square bracket, capital G, it matters that you have a capital, and say 10. Okay, so if I have this at this point, again, I can format paint that over there. This time, just you know, we might make that thing red. Let's get rid of the background color on this one, okay, and just run that. Okay. So all we've done now is add something to the top, but you can see that we took away that format, the highlighter on the 30,000 here, and we made this one red, but it is giving me my correct number, and it's right in line with these other numbers, okay? So the only thing we need to do now is get rid of this white space. So that's super simple. All you have to do is click on the number 9, hold the shift. I mean, I don't have to, I guess I could suppress row and suppress row right there. So even though I'm using these rows to create some calculation, I don't want to see those rows in my eventual printout of my report, so I can suppress that information, run the data. I probably should have got rid of the red. Let's go ahead and do that. Hold on. I'm going to get rid of the red background here. Run the data. Okay. And then my output looks really nice at this point. So I've got no extra white space. I've got budget information, which is under these blue columns here. Let's go to that parking and storage one here. So I can see that 55,000 showing up. And then that one number, 30,000 showing up to the right of that. If I wanted to show the detail, I just wouldn't suppress this information. That's totally okay. But in this case, I do want to show the detail. So I'm ag summing that, and then I'm referencing that cell at the top. You can do that a million different ways, but that's an easy way to do that. So I get my 30,000. Okay. So where do I go from here? In my report, okay, I've got COs as well. We would do the exact same thing. So in this case, I'm going to say I want to add a new category. We're going to type in change orders. You'll notice that I have change orders joined by account code, and that's because I added the account code for this example at the top level of my change order. So if I go over here and I say change orders, I look at a change order, I have 4 change orders. I go down here, I've got account code. In the last example, I put the account code inside of a collection. This one, I'm going to put it on the top level of form, but I've got that account code shown with the form. So that's why it goes change order, no collection, joined by account code. So in here, change order, joined by account code. All I have to do is pull that over there and say, okay. If I were to run this now, which I can, it's really going to look the exact same thing as that previous run that I had, because any change orders that are going to be in here, maybe I have 100 change orders. I think I have 1 change order, but let's say I had 100 change order against this offsite parking and storage budget item. Well, those things would be the lowest level of repeating data. And you can see in here, we're actually suppressing the detail row anyways. Okay, so that's where I am going to put things. And so just to see this, I'm going to unsuppress. I'm going to go a little bit faster here because we already did this once, but I've got these categories on the left. I can say change orders. Here's a ton of options that I have on the change order, because the change order top level has a lot of fields on it. But I'm going to go down and say the one that I think I want is this change order value, and I'm just going to drag that right over there. The other thing that I could do besides dragging is if I just click in here, so that is highlighted in blue, and just click that arrow, it's automatically going to jump right in there. So just another way that you can do that. Okay, so let me just format paint this. Similar to what we did here, I'm going to ag sum this one at the bottom here. So I'm going to say sum, ag sum. This time, instead of contracts, we're going to add change order ag sum. scroll to the bottom to find that field that I wanted, which is this change order value, add that in there. That looks good, okay, and then just run that. If you remember, I unsuppressed rows, so we're going to start to see more data again, but I do have that $84,000, $83.45 showing up for that offsite parking. And actually, if we want to look at that, here's offsite parking, and the total of this change order, maybe it has multiple lines, is $83.45 or whatever that number is. Okay, so that's why it's showing up there against that account code. So that's lining up correctly. Okay, so again, to change all this data or reference that, I can just copy and paste this piece, and this time it's going to be H10. So I'm going to change the G to an H and show that. Okay, and then I can suppress these two rows to have that budget looking pretty good. Okay, so this is looking great. I've got a budget now that we created these ones together, these ones under the blue column, just like we would have if we had an RFI report or any other simple report. Now the commitments is where we kind of started to look at joins. I haven't even looked at a join, so let's go ahead and look at that. So what's actually happening when I add in a category? Well, if you go to the advanced side and look at joins, it's going to pull up kind of a window here that's showing you all the joins that have been created by adding those different categories together. Some reports can get very complex with joins if you have 15 different categories joining together. In this case, we've got budget items, which are joined to the change orders, joined by account code, which is why we have that in there. It automatically creates that join. Same thing, budget items joined to contract schedule values, joined by account code. Okay. We want to show budget items that do not have contracts, which makes sense, or we could show contracts that do not have budget items or have some combination of the two. And if we look at, we edit this, this is the actual join. So we're going to say budget item account code is the same thing or joined by contract schedule values account code. So anytime I have one, it's always going to try to put those things together and put those in the correct line in my report. Okay. Like I said, the joining side is probably one that is probably the most difficult thing to understand if we get into really complex type of reports. However, in 90% of the cases, because of the way that we have set up our reports and have set up the categories and given you these categories, you can just ignore joins in most cases these days. Where if I add something like this, like to build this report, I didn't even have to look at the joins. It just created them for me as long as I'm using the correct categories. So this is really good. The last couple of things that I want to show here are just kind of some cell math. So maybe I don't have a value on a form, but I want to have a value on my report. So in this case, I want my total to be F, which is here, plus G. So this is really easy, just like Excel. So I'd say equals square bracket, I'd say G8, okay? And that's because it's, G, this is row 8, okay? Plus square bracket H8, okay? So that's good. I can format that over there. And let me just highlight that for us, run that. And you can see we're doing some simple math here. So I've got that 30,000 in contracts that we were spending a lot of time on, plus that 8,000 in change orders that we did just a second ago, gives me 38,000. So some combination of that. Okay, so that looks really good. And you can continue to build this as you need throughout your report. So if I was pulling in PCOs or anything else, I would do the exact same thing I just did. Add a category. The category that I'm looking for has that joined by account code. If I've added my account code field somewhere. So kind of a prereq to all of this is I need to be able to put that account code field, which is a custom field in some cases, on those forms, but that gives you that data. The next thing that I want to show really quickly, so I'm going to unhighlight that, is, all right, so if I'm looking at this, this looks pretty good. However, I've got all my data kind of crammed together. What if I wanted to group, not only group on account code, but group, let's say, on the first two characters of my account code? Okay, so that's a separate group. You can have as many groups as you want in your report. So I'm going to go in here and say, all right, so now I need another group. And the thing that should ring is, okay, if I need a group, I need to sort before I have a group. So I'm going to go in here and say I want to sort. I do have that. I'm going to add a formula, and I'm going to say, you know what, I just want the left 2 characters of that account code. Okay, so if you look at this, it says 00-01-, you know, whatever, 02-. Those are parts of my segment. You set that up in the account code area, which again is a different webinar. So I'm going to say the account code, and I just want the 2 characters. So this is saying, give me the left of that full string and give me the 2 characters on the left. So I'm going to say, okay, this is going to show up as my second sort, but I actually want that to show above. I want that to be the first thing that we're sorting on, and say, okay. Just like I added those other headers, I click the detail or anything else, say add group header, say this time group by that left piece, okay. It showed up by default underneath of this one here, which is not what I want. So I'm going to actually click on that and say move that up, okay. And if I just, and I won't go too far here, but just to show you this, if I just make this all, let's say black, and I run this now, you'll notice that because I've added that new sort, now I'm starting to group by those left 2 segments. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea on how to group that data. In this case, now I can start to add my sums to the entire group. Okay, so if I wanted to do that, again, I'm going to go kind of quick here, but add section, group footer. I'm going to get this left account code. Left piece here. This is showing up not where I want. I actually want it one below here, so it's the last thing. And here I could say, and I'm just going to type this in here instead of using oh, this is another way to do this though. So I can say add or equals ag sum, and I'm going to say B9. So I'm going to square bracket B9 and close that up there, and just take this to the right, or I guess I can just format that in there. And maybe I say here subtotal, okay, and I can make all of this bold. And so that looks good. And now maybe I'll add another space into there. But now if I run this, now you can start to see within each grouping that I have, I'm starting to get the subtotals that I want to show. Okay. Okay, so not only can I group that first grouping that we had, was grouping within each account code. That's why we said, what are all the contracts against this account code? What are all the change orders against this account code? But the second group is a layer outward, and we say, okay, what's the sum of everything that we have in the left 2 characters of that account code? So everything that's an 01, everything that's an 02, etc. That works not only on all these budget item pieces, but if I go over here, okay, I can do the same thing. So I'm going to say ag sum, what's interesting is I could actually use this exact same formula, and this kind of highlights, you know, what the heck, what's in there. I could use that because this is at this level, it's going to sum, you know, per account code. At this level, it's going to sum up all the contracts per the left 2 segments or characters of the account code. So instead of using something like this, which is probably the easier one to look at and see, you could also continue to use something like this to get that data. And it's just where that thing is showing up on the report that's going to give you your value. So the 135 is the sum of all these things up here, which gives me that value. Okay, so really nice. And I can also highlight this. Let's say I want to add a border on here at the top, just to call out those sums in some way. Okay, so this is starting to look really nice. Looks a lot like a budget report that I might be familiar with or wanting to run. Okay, so based on what I've shown in the first webinar and in this webinar, hopefully, you know, if you go back and rewatch and stop and pause if you need to, there's a lot of resources here to be able to create some really great reports. Really, any way that you want, any data that you have in the system, you can do that. I do want to kind of quickly jump over to a dashboard, show you how to create a dashboard. We only have about 10 minutes left. I'll try to keep to that, but I do think it's important, to, at least as a basic level. Maybe we'll have another webinar on dashboards in a little bit. But let's say this report is A-okay, and we feel really good about that. Next thing I want to do is create a dashboard. So dashboards are more visual than a report. The reports are really showing really detailed information. Dashboards should be used to show kind of outside information. So how do we create a dashboard? I'm going to click this new tile area. We have different options: visualizations, existing reports, URLs, text, etc. I'm going to just add text, so I'm going to drag and drop that. We're just going to call this thing webinar dashboard. And I'm going to close this up, and that shows kind of at the top of my dashboard. I'm just going to add, let's say, 3 different types of tiles to my dashboard in respect of time here. So the first one might be a visualization. So let's say that I want to add something below this, and this is just going to count. Maybe we'll do 2 different ones, but what is my total revised budget for the project at this point? Okay, so that's just going to be a single number. I'm going to actually use a KPI for that. A KPI is just like, what's my key performance indicator? I just want to see where am I at on my revised budget at this point. On the left-hand side, I've got all these different categories, which we should be pretty familiar with now. I can open up budget items. I'm going to go down to revised budget, or I could say pending revised budget, but let's say the things that are just approved. I'm going to pull that right over there. Now it's going to say count my revised budget items. That doesn't make sense. 87 doesn't do me any good. I'm actually going to just sum up the data. Okay, so now I've got some really large number here, 83 million or whatever that might be. It doesn't look so pretty though, so I can go to my styles. I can change the color if I wanted to say, you know what, this should be, you know, some kind of blue color or whatever. I could do that, and I can also change the way that this number looks. So I want the 1,000 separator. Do I want to use the currency symbol? Do I want it expanded like that, or do I not really care about the details and just show kind of an English short scale, I guess, in this case? So that looks pretty nice. Okay, so I've got a little dashboard there. The next thing that I want to do is, let's say that I want to make a visualization. This was a KPI visualization. I'm just going to pull these around. Let's make kind of a more of a graphical chart visualization. In this case, because we did RFIs last time, let's talk about RFIs really quickly. So I can go down here, find RFIs. I actually want to make it, let's say, a bar chart or whatever column. And I want to show my RFIs based on the due dates. So I can say date due, pull that by group. And then my values, what do I want to count on, whatever is unique. So let's say I want to count on the RFI document IDs. So in this case, I can see I've got 8 things that are due, let's say, on the 3rd, 6 that are due on the 1st, 6 that are due on the 20th, etc. The thing that gets, you know, more powerful or more visual here is, well, what if I have 2 different groups? So let's say that I've got RFIs by due date, but I also want to show that in the same chart by category as well. So in that case, this is going to show me, okay, well, now based on these different dates, I've also got, let's say, 2 that are general. In this case, I've got 4 that are structural, and they can be side-by-side charts, or you can do stacked charts as well. So this is another kind of nice way to view this data. And then the last thing that I want to add is another type of tile, which would be my existing report. I can just drag that down here. And this might be that report that we just worked on together. So that budget report for webinar, I'm just going to drag that right into this section, okay? And that'll load up there. And that's the thing that we started with, but I think, let me actually change that to this one. Apply that one. Okay, so this is the one that we ended up with. So that looks really nice. If I want to run this now, I'm going to need to save it. You can also do some really nice things like change the canvas color to, you know, my blue color scheme. Do I want to add borders to my tiles? Let's say that's some kind of dark blue or something. It's got a width of 5 pixels or something. So I can run that and just say this is a dashboard for webinar. Okay. And then I'll run that thing. Okay, so very, very simple dashboard. I kind of commented that if we have time, we'll get to dashboards. We knocked that thing out in 5 minutes, so hopefully that wasn't too fast. But that should give you kind of a basic of, okay, you can create some really great reports like we did in the first and second webinar here. You can also pull in all of the data that you have in the projects into these really nice dashboards. This might be the first page that, you know, if I bookmark this page or something like that, if I want to log in the morning, this is the first page that I see. This actually looks pretty ugly, this piece here, but you can go in here and say, you know what, I'm going to call that thing total budget at this point, and then run it. Okay, so you can rename things, you can do whatever you want in these dashboards, and that looks all great. I can change the colors to be my color scheme. All that is available. Okay. Alrighty, so I do want to kind of open up to see the last couple slides here, and then I'll get into some of the questions that we have. I'm sure there will be a lot, but I can go in here. So if I go back to the slides, we have a bunch of upcoming webinars coming up. You can always go to our main website, go to resources, webinar schedule. This webinar, along with any others that we've done in the past, will be recorded and shown there. And then you can also sign up for upcoming webinars, which the turnout has been really awesome on all of these webinars. Like I said, we'll send out a survey after this if you want to provide any feedback, or hey, we'd also like to see a webinar on this or that, or maybe we have additional questions. We'll make sure that we direct the correct resources to you to answer all of those questions. But that's where you do that. And then I'll skip this because we say it at the end of every webinar, but depending on where you are in your search, you have a lot of options. Just reach out to us or go to our website and find what you need there, and we'd be happy to help in any way that we can. And like I said in the past, go ahead and follow us on LinkedIn. We always are posting things on there. We're posting the recorded webinars, just different blog posts, all that good stuff on that platform. Okay. So let me go over to the questions. Okay, so the first one is, I didn't finish the report on over under, but if I did, so the question is about over under and conditionally adding style. So yes, if I added an over under in that last piece of my report that I added, and let's say it was over budget, and that means the text should show up as red, you can do conditional formatting. I think I might have mentioned that in the original webinar that I did, but if not, I can look at that and I can send this person an answer on that. But certainly you can do that. It's very easy to do. Forecasting on your budget. There's different ways to do forecasting in Project Team. We've seen it where you can, I mean, if you want to include forecasting on your report, really you need a place to track your forecast on your project. Okay, so whether that is a forecasted collection on your budget item form, and you can say, okay, the forecast at this date is this, the forecast at this date is this. You can pull the top number of that to pull into your budget report. You might have a forecasting type of form or some other collection that you're tracking that somewhere else. Really, anywhere that you're tracking your forecast within the system, you can pull that into your budget in different ways. We didn't talk about exporting, but yes, you can export any of these different things that we talked about today, especially the report type of stuff. You can include visualizations on your reports. You can export that to PDF, Excel, Word document, or RTF and CSV. And you can also schedule. One of the questions that we got last time was, how do you schedule? I didn't show that here, but you can schedule. So if I just really quickly jump out, if I go to that report that we were creating together, you can do something called schedule the report. All right, and here's where you would say, I want to deliver this at 7 a.m. weekly on Mondays. And that way, okay, I've spent all this time making a really great report, or I've done that maybe at the company or organization level, and I want this report maybe automatically delivered to my executive team or automatically delivered to me before I walk into a meeting, those type of things. You can set all of that in the system so that I set up a report once, or we have a lot of great resources to help you set up reports as well. So maybe we set up that report and it just delivers to you. So there's nothing you have to do. It just gets sent to you. You can do drill downs in those reports. That's one click away. You can jump right into wherever you need to be in the system, but all of that is 100% doable. And we are right up at the 4 o'clock mark Eastern here, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time. There are a couple more questions that I do want to get to, but I'll answer those individually. Thanks so much for joining the webinar today. I will send out another survey to you guys. If there's anything else that I left out, please just send the questions back through that survey. We read all of those things. They've been super helpful, as I mentioned, and hopefully we'll see all you guys on the next webinar, which is in a couple weeks here. I forget what that's going to be on, but always excited to see and hear the feedback. Thanks everybody for joining. I'll see you next time.